one of the first people, if not the first person, to sign the Book of Condolence at the South African Embassy in Trafalgar Square was David Cameron. But it's interesting to see that he had a freebie trip to apartheid South Africa right at the height of the ban, really. I mean, he admitted his party had got it wrong, though, over sanctions when he later visited Mandela. David Cameron accepted an all-expenses-paid trip to apartheid South Africa, while Nelson Mandela was still in prison. An updated biography of the Tory leader reveals today a trip by Mr Cameron in 1989, when he was a rising star of the Conservative Research Department, was a chance for him to see for himself, and was funded by a firm that lobbied against the imposition of sanctions on the apartheid regime. Critics described it as a sanction-busting jolly that raised questions about the character of the man who, after a week when the government's credibility on the economy hit a new low, this is back in April 2009, was on course to be Prime Minister in a little more than a year's time.
Yeah, that trip in 1989 is quite interesting because two other people were on that trip. One was Sir Kenneth Warren, who most people won't have heard of, but he's a rather important fundraiser for the Conservative Party and has been for many years, a sort of a money man. And the third person on that trip was Dr. David Kelly. And the purpose of the trip was to go to arms corps.
This is the government scientist who died in 2003 in
the very same one.
Circumstances.
So there were three people on this delegation: Dr. David Kelly, Sir Kenneth Warren, and David Cameron, who is a 20-something from Conservative Central Office. And information that we've been receiving suggests that there was a deal being cooked up. South Africa had 9 nuclear weapons. They originally had 10 nuclear weapons, which they developed at Pelindaba with the Israelis. One of them was exploded over the South Atlantic. That left 9 nuclear weapons. It's like 10 green bottles, isn't it, this story? Anyway, as the changes were about to take place in South Africa, the Magnus Malan, who was the defence minister, Arms Corps, which was their equivalent of BAE Systems, and they basically went to the west via an intermediary called John Bradenkamp, who was an ex-Rhodesian SAS operative, but was now actually a major arms dealer. People can look him up on the internet, and they will find him. He actually lives in Kilmansdown in Somerset now. But basically, they did a deal. They said, we don't want Nelson Mandela and the ANC to have these 9 nuclear warheads. So this is actually the white South African government saying that, well, since the country's going over to black majority rule, we think that they shouldn't have access to these secret nuclear weapons we've got. Yeah, because otherwise Nelson Mandela would have got his finger on the nuclear button as soon as he won the election. That wasn't acceptable to the white South African elite, and it wasn't acceptable to the Western powers either. So they did a deal whereby these 9 nuclear warheads, which were uranium-based nuclear warheads, were sold to the Western powers, 6 to the Americans and 3 to the British. But what happened? The American missiles the American warheads were loaded at Durban and taken to the US and dismantled. The 3 British warheads, and this is what we suspect this delegation was about, they weren't sold to the British government directly. A private company called Astra Holdings, which was actually a subsidiary of Astra Fireworks, if people remember them, they set up by a chap called Stephen Koch, who used to be an MI6 officer. They bought the 3 warheads, as it were, on the black market from Arms Corps, and then sold them on to the British government for £50 million. And Margaret Thatcher, one of the last things she did as she left office was sign a payment order for £50 million to Astra Holdings for these 3 warheads. But the warheads, of course, they had bought them from the South African government at much less than £50 million. And those who were involved in this scam got basically a profit from it, including the Conservative Party itself, which made £17.8 million to fund the 1992 general election.
Now, it's a pretty shocking accusation, Martin. Also,
well, I've made
people
it
can
before,
find it. People can find it online. It's an article by Peter Eyre. It's probably the best one you can find, EYRE, on his own blog or on the Palestine Telegraph website about this whole story. But what evidence have you got for it?
Well, I'm getting evidence from people who were involved. So they're talking to me I can't say who because they've signed the Official Secrets Act. But in any case, as you say, if people want to check this story for themselves, they can find it on Palestine Telegraph or Peter Ayres.
I mean, this 17 million donation, for example, is there any evidence for that?
Yes, there is. Doug Hoyle, the Labour MP, had been tipped off about this, and he actually, it's in Hansard. He made a question in the House of Commons. I can't remember what the year was. It was in the 1990s, saying, well, where did this £17.8 million come from? And there was a sort of bluff, we can't possibly tell you, you'll have to look into it. But anyway, I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, even in banker terms, £17.8 million is not peanuts, and in political terms, it's quite a large amount of money.
Well, certainly.
Possibly could have made the difference between Major losing or winning the election, for example.
Well, certainly a fascinating twist to David Cameron's trip.
There's a further twist to the story, of course, which is that the warheads themselves then went missing. They lost them.
Well, how did they get the money for this 17 million then?
They went round Tory party donors and asked them to chip in to the pot, and then all of these people would then be paid back, and they were paid back. We've been given a list of people who actually made a lot of money out of this.